Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Winback, and on today's episode of RPG Radio, I've got the second half of the Druid build for you, and just like the last, it's full of thunder, lightning, and a bad attitude. In this video though, I will tell you about the gear that we're currently rocking, the gear that I wish we had, and then a couple of pitfalls when it comes to this build because it has been a little bit difficult to get things where I want them to be. Not necessarily the game's fault, maybe a little bit more my fault than anything, but we'll talk about that. Before we go too far though, let me at least reconcile some of the new abilities that we're using since the last video. Namely, we have picked up Nullification, which is incredibly potent as a Arcanist ability. Almost forgot the class because it's just so unfun normally, but Nullification is an incredibly useful ability, and it's going to remove positive status effects from bad guys and negative status effects from your character. It's got a really high cooldown because it is a very strong ability, and a lot of people who play this game, obviously in the comments and any other website or video that you can find them on, will sing the praises of Nullification until the end of days. So it's kind of hard not to pick it up in the later stages of the game where we do need a lot of extra utility that this ability can provide. We also have a brand new ability that is item provided, and that's coming from our Storm Reaver. That's our two-handed axe we're using right now, but it's called Storm Tap, and it's basically just a chain lightning that we can fire off at range that has a pretty moderate cooldown, if I'm being honest. It does fill in some gaps if I need to deal damage on the run or maybe thin the herd a little bit from distance, but all in all, I'd say it works with the theme of the build, and it doesn't interrupt the flow of my combos too often either. We've also picked up very important passive called Stormcaller Aura, and that is taken from the mythical relic Eye of the Storm. Eye of the Storm, I think, is the preeminent lightning focused relic, so it's actually, if all things considered, it was one of the first mythical relics that I ever picked up, so it's fairly simple to achieve, I think, as long as you have the blueprint for it. But regardless of all that, Stormcaller Aura gives us flat lightning damage, gives us a chance to do electrocute damage, buffs cold, lightning, electrocute, and frostburn, while giving us lightning resistance and lightning retaliation. It is lightning. I don't know if I need to say that anymore. Maybe the YouTube algorithm or it's gonna pick up some like cool slow motion lightning videos with this. That'd be wicked. Anyway, so that's out of the way. What's next? Let's talk about those few changes to the devotion tree that I had to make, and that would just be to fill out the Kraken devotion. So we got all the bonuses from that bad boy, and then our remaining points we took and put into Amatok, the Spirit of Winter. Mainly because Amatok is providing some offensive ability, pretty decent stats when it comes to percent health, and the types of damage that we are after on top of that. Cold resistance too is pretty cool, but considering that this build already has a whole lot of elemental resistance, we are overmaxed quite well on all three of the elemental damage types. Also, Amatok's activatable devotion ability is Blizzard, and it only activates on critical attacks. So making sure that that hits stuff is pretty important, but right now the offensive ability in this build is not as high as it needs to be for ultimate to make that go off as often as possible. Actually, I don't think you're going to see it go off even once in this entire video, which is maybe my fault. I don't know if it's assigned or not in this video, but it should be. Top quality content everybody comes to this channel for. Anyway, let's talk about what else is going on. Now, one of the things that I really want to mention with this build is that I had an absolutely abysmal time finding gear for everything to work the way that I want it to. Not even going through my big item stores in my other characters' inventories really helped a whole lot. So in the last video, you noticed that we had the 3 Mogdrogan set pieces to get us some big damage into Primal Strike and just kind of help bridge that elite gap. And they did. They certainly did. But now that we're in Ultimate, those weapons are entirely useless, and it actually took me quite a while of struggling along with that lower end gear to get the bigger items like the Storm Reaver, the Mythical Shroud of Illusion, and even then, because I had the weaker gear, it was taking longer to level up, which I probably could have dealt with a little bit better with some clarity potions and some more efficient farming, but man, I was not having a very motivated weekend, I'll give you that. Anyway, the gear grind took much longer than normal, meaning that the XP grind took much longer than normal, meaning again that the higher gear grind took even longer than all of that. So let me tell you at least what we're rocking right now in the gear. You can check this out in the Grim tools as well, but for all intents and purposes, this is not final gear. This is just gear that's making it easy enough to farm up reputation, farm up experience, and complete quests. So our weapon, like I mentioned earlier, the Storm Reaver, that gives 2 to all skills in Shaman and 1 to Storm Totem. Also gives you energy absorbed from enemy spells, which is super handy, and removes some of the pressure on our Arcanist abilities that do that. We've also got Storm Herald's Visage, which really isn't the greatest thing in the world, but it does have that Aether and Chaos resist and 2 points into Savagery. So could be better, could be worse. Ice Trap, is our amulet, and that's giving 2 points into Flash Freeze, as well as Ring of Rime Fire, which is a cold and frostburn while slowing ability. The rings right now aren't anything to write home about. There's Open Hand of Mercy and Glyph of Kel'Thuzad. They're giving points in places that I don't need points, but sorry, that's just the glyph. The Open Hand of Mercy is just pure stats. It's really good health regen, energy regen. You get vitality and elemental resistance, and it is going to reduce the target's damage while giving you defensive ability. If you can get the Closed Fist of Vengeance, it does provide some really good ability in the set, but I haven't run across that yet, so we're just kind of slumming it. The shoulders we're using are the Fate Weaver's Mantle with the Mirror of Arioctes and the Nullification points, as well as the Fade from Reality passive. That's going to activate when you drop below 45% health, giving you 20% movement speed, 100% physical resistance, 200% pierce resistance for 5 seconds. Really good stuff there, but it's on a minute-long cooldown, and I don't think I'm going to stick with it. Let's see, what else is important? Runic Bracers are incredibly good, just for the defensive stats that they provide, but they're not a mainstay in any build that I use. They're basically just there to keep me alive until I can find gear that I want. And then lastly, let's see, the last thing that really makes sense in this build is the Storm Titan Treads. They're not good points-wise. They don't give us anything because neither of the classes, it's the Soldier and the Demolitionist that Storm Titan Treads work for. But they are giving us Lightning Retaliation, Reduced Stun Duration, and Poison Elemental Resistance. So those stats alone are quite helpful with this build. And we have a 25% chance when we get hit to deal lightning electrocute damage and reduce the target's damage too. So you might have noticed in this video, I'm trying desperately to find bigger enemies to attack because that was one of the things that we were struggling with in Elite. Bosses were just kind of taking forever to die. Now, here in Ultimate, they hit harder and my resistances aren't finished yet, but I do think that they're dying faster. So the rate at which we do damage has increased, but at the same time, we're still missing a lot of that viability that we need for the end game, and that can only be found in specific gear that I'm looking for. Namely, the Altos set is on my radar, and I think there is another one that I can't recall at the moment, but we're only level 84-ish at the moment, so even if I wanted to use those are level 94 items, and this build hasn't made it that far yet. I might crank out some clarity potion runs soon, but even then, I'm not sure. I like the build. I've definitely felt the grind on this one a little bit more than others, which is kind of sad because it started off really fun and I was just plowing through everything. But as it stands right now, the length of time it's taking to find the gear that I want to make this build good is just too much. One of the things that I learned coming into Ultimate with this build is that I do not have the amount of offensive ability really required to make the damage in this kit sing as much as I want it to. We do kill enemies very, very fast that have low offensive ability, but I'm also trying to stack it up right now because I am pretty severely lacking, I think. While it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, everything is just going to live forever, the amount of critting that I'm doing and the amount of, well, I guess just missing against some of the boss characters and bigger characters in general is really not great. So what I did to kind of offset that is we picked up some new passives on the Arcanist side of things on top of Nullification, and Inner Focus is actually really important for filling in some of the gaps. Inner Focus gives you a % increase to Spirit and a % increase to offensive ability. It's actually, with the amount of points that I have in it right now, we get 1% per point in. So I've got 8% at the moment, meaning that my my offensive ability, even though it's still relatively low at 2113, it could be much worse. It could be much worse, actually. So, regardless of all that, remember, when your offensive ability is lower than the defensive ability of the enemy, you're going to hit them less because you can miss, and I think if they're even, or they're close enough that you won't be able to crit the enemy. So the higher their DA is compared to your OA means the less you're going to crit them, and then if it's even lower than that, the less you're going to actually hit them. Unfortunately, with the need for offensive ability, one of the other abilities that I really wanted to make the mainstay of this kit took some, well, it took the attention off of that ability because we have to start diverting points that we'd be using in that ability to Inner Focus because we, you know, offensive ability. I don't know how many times I can say that this video, but I hope it sticks. You're welcome. I'm sorry at the same time. Anyway, Brute Force, Feral Hunger, and Upheaval were their passive abilities that activate off of your default attacks. Sadly, they are kind of my backup boss damaging tool, but because of the lack of points in each of them, they aren't necessarily doing as much as I want them to. Feral Hunger specifically is very, very good for getting health back when you are just in an auto attack face-off with certain bosses, but I do not have enough points in it at the moment to activate it often enough to get enough health back to just be that face-tanking, two-handed demon god that I wish I was. So that will be done by the end of the build, but right now it's like, it's that compromise that I was talking about in the theory crafting video, but it just isn't nearly as fun as I want it to be because things aren't working. that said, sorry this was kind of a low energy video. I realized it was, you know, well, we're doing what we can. But I'll be back next week. We'll continue down the path of the 3 builds from the theory crafting video, and I will catch you guys in the next video.